Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Janai and this is Karmic Fixer Tarot. And today I wanted to do an unboxing of a new deck that I got. I try not to necessarily collect a bunch of decks, but every now and then one will stick out to me. And I saw some stills of this particular deck, the Rosebud Tarot, and so I was curious. A lot of times I'll buy a deck, if I do buy a deck, maybe sight unseen, maybe a few cards that I've seen on the internet. And this is from a shop, Panthere Studios. They're based in, I believe, Tennessee. They've got a lot of really beautiful decks, a lot of great material on tarot, the occult. Really, it's a really great shop. And I ordered these from there, the Rosebud Tarot. And I'm not sure where I first saw a glimpse of these cards, but I thought they were really beautiful. So I'm going to go ahead and unbox these. It doesn't always occur to me to open a tarot deck on camera. Um, so yeah, I'm I'm starting out my journey in tarot. I've only been at it since, I dare say, late October of last year. So I've got a few decks on hand. I'm going to try with some scissors. Um, I don't necessarily feel like I want to collect a lot of different decks, but every now and then one will catch my eye. I feel like I'm kind of a minimalist. I don't necessarily want to have a whole bunch of different decks because one thing that I'm drawn to is I do like tarot, but I'm also drawn to cartomancy. I'm using playing cards. I like the idea of maybe making my own decks or doing divination with maybe with playing cards or just kind of offbeat sort of divination like Uno cards. I've really gotten into Unomancy is what I call it. I know this looks a little chaotic. I'm digging into a new deck with craft scissors. I probably should have at least gotten the shrink wrap off of it before starting this video. I'm not so great at opening things. It kind of takes me a while, but here we go. Yeah, so this looked like a really beautiful deck, and one of the things that stood out to me about it was the way that the cards are labeled. I do like decks that have maybe unconventional naming qualities to the cards. Maybe they'll call them coins instead of pentacles, for example, or sticks instead of wands, or maybe a different name for the elements. So that's kind of what stuck out to me. So here we go. Let's see. Now I'd seen these online. Just as I was saying, I didn't necessarily need another deck right now because I recently bought a petite Etiella or Italia deck, and I might branch into doing Italia readings on here also. That's still a system that I'm learning, but more on that some other time. So here is the booklet. We'll just kind of flip through here to get an idea of the different. We'll just open up on here. Yeah, I might get more into sharing this book here in a little while. So yeah, that's kind of a start. So let's take a look at the cards themselves. Okay, the back's really beautiful. And I don't know if they're already in a particular order, but we'll take a look at a few of them. And I was thinking maybe I'd do a reading with them in this particular sitting, or I might come back at a later date after I've shuffled them or whatnot. So we have a few cards. So we're starting with the water suit. Here are the court cards, which I think this is what really caught my eye. The way that the court cards are labeled. We have the curiosity of water, which I would take to be the equivalent of maybe the Page of Cups. So I think that's very interesting. Curiosity of water. We have, say, velocity of water, which I would take to be the Knight of Cups sort of energy. It's kind of intrepid, sort of youthful but not childlike. This sort of energy of emotion and kind of an earnest, youthful but not childish kind of way. And then we have generosity of water, which I guess corresponds to the Queen of Cups. And we have the sovereignty of water, which I guess would be, well, let's see. Maybe that's not so simple. Both of these look like queens here. But I would take this to be more of a queen type energy, maybe a mastery of an emotional, receptive sort of energy of that particular element, which is generally associated with queen or divine feminine sort of energy. So generosity of water versus the sovereignty of water, maybe the King of Cups in Standard Tarot. The sovereignty, just sort of a majesty, a mastery, kind of a very active energy of that element, maybe the highest expression, the highest mastery of a particular element, which in Standard Tarot is attributed to the court card of the king, I guess. So this is really interesting. So these images are very beautiful. We've got the Ten of Water, which I guess would be the Ten of Cups. And if you're familiar with Standard Tarot, maybe Rider-Waite decks, this is actually very reminiscent, I guess, of the Ten of Cups, only it's the Ten of Water. Actually, I'd love to share some information maybe about the creator of this deck, because so far I'm really very interested, very intrigued by the collage style. I think that's, I love that aesthetic. I think I'm really going to enjoy these cards here. Let's see. I want to see if I can find the name of the author. Let's see. They're described as an archetypal dreamscape. Let's see. I want to see if I could find some information about the creator. But there is some information about the elements, the correspondence. Let's see. We have the water, which would correspond to cups, fire, which would correspond to wands, air, which corresponds to swords, and earth, which corresponds to pentacles. So I guess I'll just show some more cards here. We have our water, Ten of Water. I don't know if I'll cycle through this entire deck like this because it might get a little tedious. This is a very beautiful deck. I really look forward to working with these cards. And these are larger than the last few decks that I've gotten. I find that I have a little trouble shuffling the larger decks. Got kind of smallish hands. But yeah. Water. We've got our Ace of Water. And I like the court cards. We have fire here. I think this corresponds probably with the King of Wands. We have the sovereignty of fire. And the generosity of fire, the Queen of Wands. Velocity of fire, the knights. And the curiosity, the page. Very sort of creative energy, very forward, kind of passionate, active energy. Very expressive. We have I think what I will probably do is I will hold them up as they are the court cards or the kind of some really interesting, actually, Three of Fire, the Two of Fire, kind of like the Two of Wands, a very sort of exploratory energy, stepping out to the world. And we have our Ace of Fire, very beautiful. Okay, we have our court cards of Earth, aka Pentacles. Let's see, so we have the sovereignty of Earth. We've got our king here. And these still have a very new deck smell. Let's see, the generosity of Earth. And the Queen of Pentacles. This one's cute. Velocity of Earth. Curiosity of Earth. our page energy. Let's see. All right. I feel like this, again, might get a little tedious, just holding each of these up. And on one hand, I don't know if people want to see an entire deck before maybe they commit to buying it, or if people are like me who like to be surprised. Sometimes I'll get a deck based off of just one or two cards I've maybe seen online. It's like, oh, this is really very intriguing. Let's see. Beautiful. Ace of Earth, a seed growing into a plant. We have our Sovereignty of Air, the Generosity of Air, our court cards again for air or the swords. I'd be curious to see what this sword/air cards look like here. And the swords is always an interesting suit, a very challenging suit. And I'm always curious as to how they're rendered in in a different type of deck. So we have our King, Sovereignty of Air, King of Swords. We have our Generosity of Air, the Queen of Swords. Our Velocity of Air, Knight of Swords, and our Page of Swords, aka Curiosity of Air. Okay, so getting into the sword suit / the air suit, I'm really curious about this. Well, this is very interesting. The Ten of Air, also, I'd say this would probably correspond with the Ten of Swords, and if you're familiar with the iconic imagery of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, that very kind of stark image of the Ten of Swords card, the literal 10 swords impaling a person. So this might be interesting. This looks like a hospital ward. A face mask, I can only think of, say, something like an air pestilence, maybe a pandemic, or some sort of virus going around. It's very fascinating. And I guess just taking a look at these sight unseen, not necessarily sight unseen, but without the guidebook, just the images alone. And the Nine of Air also corresponding with the Nine of Swords, another very kind of stark card in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. This is very similar to that particular card. Kind of a very dark imagery. These, I'm not entirely sure what these images are, but they're very fascinating. Of course, they're on the 10, so this image might be a motif throughout this entire suit. And I might have to take a look at the guidebook to get some insight on what that is. It's a very fascinating card, very evocative. We've got our Eight of Air, our Eight of Swords. I'm dealing with finger traps here, I guess. Seven of Air, or the Seven of Swords. Six of Air, Six of Swords. Air. Very fascinating. That looks like the White House in the background. Very interesting. Four of Swords. Like somebody in repose. They've also got an old-timey football uniform on, helmet and their civil boots. Interesting. The Three of Air. I think that's a really interesting subversion on the iconic Three of Swords card. The heart with the three swords piercing it. This looks very similar to that. Somebody obviously very tearful sadness there, beautifully rendered. Of course, the Two of Air. This actually does remind me more of the Rider-Waite-Smith image, the blindfolded woman. The Two of Air. And we have the Ace of Air. And I do want to get maybe some insight into what the image is. Let's see. So this guidebook is very fascinating. I just flipped through the section on the major arcana cards, but we can get back to that in a moment as we see the arcana cards. But yeah, I like how this is broken down. We have, let's see, the aces. Oh, I wonder if there's a part where they explain the imagery of air. Not entirely sure. I might have to come back to that. I didn't necessarily want this to be a very long video. But yeah, so we've taken a look through our pip cards, our suits. Beautiful deck. And now we can take a look at the major arcana, starting with the youth, also known as the Fool, I would assume. Corresponds to the Fool. Very beautiful card. We have the Mage, the Magician. Let's see. The Witch, the High Priestess. That's very fascinating. We have the Life Giver, which I would associate with the Empress. And I think the thing I liked, the preview that I saw of these cards, just kind of the renaming of the cards, I think that might actually be really helpful for more intuitive reading also. Maybe in, say, the Rider-Waite-Smith or Standard Tarot, you get a card like maybe the Empress. Depending on the imagery, it might not be so immediate right away what to associate the Empress with. But something like, say, a Life Giver might put you in the vein of maybe a mother, a maternal energy, a divine sort of feminine energy, or just an energy of generative creation. And I think this label for that particular card, for example, is a really good. It's a really good thing. So I think the names given to the major arcana archetypes, I think that's very helpful. I think that will be very useful to someone like me who's still getting a feel for tarot, or somebody who just wants a different take on the standard traditional archetypes of the tarot. So again, the Life Giver. And we have the Professor. Let's see. Okay. I have this a little out of order. Because I think of the Hierophant, I think of the Professor. Oh, I've got these a little out of order now. Interesting. The Professor. Okay, yeah, I skipped over him. The Elder is the Emperor. Okay, I'm over here doing too much. The Elder, the Emperor, and the Professor, the Hierophant. The Lovers, the Lovers. That one stays the same. And we have the Chariot. I'm always interested in people's takes on the Chariot. Sometimes it's a literal chariot. Other times it's something a little more modern, a little more innovative. Like we have a car here, an automobile, and we've got the open road here. So very, very Americana. Very interesting card. Let's see, Chariot. We have Strength. Instead of one line, we have two. It's kind of a very sort of circus feel. We've got a woman, with kind of the sort of feel of, a circus strongman, only this is a woman. And she's flanked by two docile looking lions. So that's a very interesting take on this card. The Seeker, which I would take to be the Hermit. The Wheel, of course, the Wheel of Fortune. I like this carousel motif. Very beautiful, very striking. Okay, balance. This looks like, I guess this looks like temperance. Is this temperance? No, it is not. It's justice, obviously. I don't know where I got temperance from, but this is justice, balance. Oh, the hang up. Wonder if this is the hanged man. Maybe I don't necessarily want to say the hanged man, but the hang up. This was a really interesting take on that type of energy, that energy of surrender, or I don't know. This would be interesting interpretation. This person is doing a tightrope walk over something very perilous. Maybe they run the risk of falling off of that tightrope. Um, I would think that being a tightrope walker takes a certain degree of not just skill, but being able to master your emotions, being able to surrender to the act of walking the tightrope. Maybe letting go of control and just allowing your body, or I would assume a sort of muscle memory if you're walking a tightrope. This is a very interesting card. This is one that I would look at some more just to get another, just to kind of get a feel for this card. But this appears to be the hangman or the hang up. Mm. We have the death card, quite literally death, not particularly frightening, but yeah, the death card. Let's see. Alchemy. Now this is probably now this looks like temperance to me. Death is transition, the ending of a cycle, and alchemy is, you know, coming back from that, or creating something new from something that's old, or something that's changed, or just kind of turning your pain or your struggle or your hardship or the situation that you're in into something else, um, creating something generative, something beautiful. It's a kind of a generative change, transition. Maybe the actual act itself of the transition that death kind of brings forward. Death gets that transition into motion. Something has to end before something else can begin. So yeah, we refer to this guidebook again. I'm um, pretty sure that's corresponding temperance. Yeah. Okay. And we have the devil card, which is a very interesting rendering of this card. There's the devil and the devil's captive. The interesting thing about traditional representations of the devil is that we have two individuals in loose bindings, and the thing that's binding them to this devil is perhaps their own mind, their own limitations. Maybe they're compelled to this dark entity. They don't have to be there, but there's something about the devil they know that's keeping them locked into this particular situation. And this might be similar here. I mean, this is a very kind of interesting, almost seductive imagery. Have somebody in binds. They're kind of leaning away from the devil, but not far away. So this is really interesting. I'd love to learn more about the artists, um, their, I guess, how they would, this reimagining of the devil card, and maybe more of an interpretation of this particular archetype. So this is a very fascinating rendering of the devil card. And we have the tower. It's no mistaking the tower. Cracks in the foundation, the lightning. Tower itself, it's off kilter. Let's see. Oh, we have the star. This is very beautiful here. I love the headdress, the outer space motif. There's a serenity to this star, um, just sort of otherworldliness. There's kind of this hope, this sort of futuristic star, but also this very kind of traditional looking headdress, very sort of ethereal. Um, Very beautiful card here. And the moon, this is very interesting. This is kind of like, this kind of has a vaudeville sort of feel to it, maybe kind of burlesque. Um, Very kind of silent movie, Hollywood sort of thing. I think this is actually one of the images I saw online of this deck. And I was like, wow, what a very striking image. And we've got the two dogs baying at the moon. We have the crescent here. And we have the mysterious lady. Fascinating. And the sun. This is a very exuberant um, imagining of the sun. Somebody in the spotlight. It's kind of a showgirl imagery, just sort of upbeat. Um, I just love the vintage feel of these cards. We've got the spotlight, the beams coming down, and just kind of the joyful expression of the lady here. And emergence. This looks like, I think here we have the sun. Now, emergence, this looks to be in the position of judgment. So this is a really interesting rendering of this particular archetype, the archetype of judgment. If you're familiar with the standard Rider-Waite cards, very kind of sort of Christian symbolism, the angel beckoning, the souls from the dead. If you're a Bible stickler, maybe the dead in Christ or whatnot. But this is a very interesting take on that archetype, emergence. So I definitely have to look at the guidebook to get more of an understanding of the artist's interpretation of that archetype in this card here. And finally, last but not least, we have the world. And the world tends to represent maybe the end of a cycle, something coming to its fullness, completion, its fullness of time. But this looks rather otherworldly. On one hand, the scenery behind it is something out of something that looks very science fiction. I like kind of the retro futuristic feel of this particular card. There's the future, and then it's a future it's really kind of, not sure how to describe it. Um, there's an otherworldliness, but also a familiarity. We've got a background that looks like outer space, and we have a foreground that looks very natural. It looks like a landscape that you would find on Earth. And we have the woman here with her flowers, and kind of like a composite of a woman, a butterfly, um, carrying her flowers, and with the light beaming from her. This is a very fascinating rendering of the world, and I really do look forward to digging into this deck. This again is the Rosebud Tarot. I'll include more information, more credits, maybe about the artist in the description of this video. I hope you enjoyed this unboxing of this particular deck with me. I really do look forward to working with these cards. Let me know what you think. Is this a deck that you'd be interested in buying? Or if you can recommend any other decks that you're interested in. Again, I see myself as keeping a relatively minimalist collection of tarot cards, but of course, as I'll be practicing tarot for, it'll be a lifelong practice, so I'll probably accumulate more decks over the years. I'm pretty sure that I will. If you have any ideas for decks, let me know in the comments. And I hope you enjoyed this deck, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If this is your sort of thing, please consider giving a like or a subscribe. And until I see you again, maybe the next time I post, I'll do a reading with this deck. I'm very, very excited about this, and it's a very beautiful deck. And I was very glad to share it with you, and I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, this is Karmic Fixer Tarot with Janai. Take care.